Yeah.
All right, everybody, how you doing? I am here with Mr. Jonathan Ira Zawicki. We use the full government. How you doing, Jonathan?
I'm doing pretty well. It's a beautiful day outside.
Thank you so much for allowing us to use a lot of your light stands and your lights and all of your equipment to to help others realize their dreams and their aspirations. We use your stuff for a lot of videos for a lot of young entrepreneurs. Probably over 20 business people here in Fresno have benefited directly from your equipment and your lighting stuff being here inside of the studio. Because when they show up here, we use it to produce their content. So that's huge. Thank you.
Well, it doesn't do anybody any good to have stuff sit in my closet or lead up against my walls. So I'm very glad that somebody is making use of it. And that's sometimes what people have to do, share what they have, whether it's their knowledge, as you're doing, teaching people sometimes what we think of as the simple things in financial literacy, or as these light stands and everything else does, it gives you a little bit of freedom to do different things.
We took about 20 minutes trying to figure this out earlier, didn't we?
Well, hey, it's sometimes not how much time it takes, but does it do what you want it to do?
Yeah, it finally did what we wanted it to do. That was a nice little fix for that. Financial literacy means a lot of different things. People are throwing this term around, but you can make this a lifelong journey, right? People should. What do you think?
Well, the world changes. Taxes, you know, government regulations, the IRS change things almost on an annual basis. And basically, when it comes to, you know, finances, if you're in business or even if you're a W-2 employee, it's not how much you your gross salary or income. It's how much the IRS takes away in taxes. Let me add in there, it's how much the state of California also takes away in taxes.
Yeah, we're here in California, so we have a way
and how much you have left.
Higher bracket. Yeah, that's right. The taxes, how much you save, what's tax advantaged, and all that has a lot to do with it. And I want to bring up before we continue, a lot of people might not know this because of your beard and hippie hair, that you are in fact one of our brothers in arms, U.S. Army veteran. Thank you for your sacrifices. I know that's a huge part of your life. So thank you for that. And more thank you for the leadership that you continue to show in the civilian world out here in our regular community in the Central Valley. And you don't just talk about it. You actually take action, you show up, you do what little you can. I see you recycling. I see you showing up for the honor guard for the VFW. I see you out there with the American Legion. You do more than most. And why do you feel that's important?
How can I put it? Everybody's got to have a hobby.
You have a lot of hobbies.
And, when it comes to recycling, I was around during the first Earth Day, and I still take it to heart. And as I joke with people, I use the recyclable bags. And I tell people I've been recycling since the mid-'70s. I haven't saved the world yet. What the heck? It's something to do.
Yeah. Yeah, I'll try to save the world. Why not, right? That's cool. The first Earth Day. Wow.
Yeah. I'm that old.
Well, no, I mean, just interesting to think a U.S. Army Vietnam veteran, Vietnam era veteran is a part of Earth Day. I'm proud of it. And, people associate different things with different people. And I wouldn't associate Earth Day with you.
Well,
I will now.
One of the problems that we have as a society is people put other people in boxes. And
it's true.
I'm on one side of the political spectrum, and people on the other side of the political spectrum, when we start discussing things, it's like, okay, how often do you recycle your bottles and cans? Funfer. Well, I said, hey, that's what you believe in, clean earth. And, it's called just because I'm on one side of the political spectrum, doesn't mean that we might not have a lot of views in common.
Sure, sure. If we focus on the things that we do have in common, uh, we would probably just run out of time because there would be so many.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's true. Uh, since financial literacy has not been a big thing in schools, even universities, I went to college, I have 2 degrees. Uh, over years, over times, we're seeing the effects of it. You have a longer body of work to look at here. You can look at the past 40 years and say, wow, we missed the mark somewhere. Was there ever a big outcry of like, hey, we need more financial literacy. Hey, people should learn more. I brought up a couple things to you. I brought up recidivism. You knew what it was. You're one of the only humans on earth who's ever known what that is. And then you brought up the rule of 72 to me, and I'm like, oh my God. A lot of people don't know that either. So throughout the years, in the past 30, 40, 50 years, whatever it is, have you seen organizations or government or somebody trying to make this financial literacy message more prevalent?
Honestly, the only place that I've seen it was when I moved to Fresno and I got recruited into the insurance business, and financial matters, interest rates, and things like that. Exactly that. Insurance rates are very dependent on interest rates. And the
What year
rule,
was that?
96, 97, 95, someplace there.
So about that time frame, you started to learn more financial concepts around those years.
I was in business. I owned stores, retail stores. I was in a manufacturing facility. And it's like there was so much I didn't know, but I didn't know that I didn't know it. And
Sure.
when you get involved in these things, the rule of 72 is a simple concept, especially when you have 18 and 20 and even 29% interest rates on some of the credit cards. You don't realize what it means. Even an 18% credit interest rate on a credit card, that is so hard to pay off. And when you get some of these predatory lenders that are up to the 30% range, and then all the late fees and everything else. I was talking to one fellow and he's looking at his, bill, and it's like, huh? He went to Starbucks and I guess he was using a debit card, and it's called, okay, let me have a cup of coffee. Came back 15 minutes later. Oh, I want one of the muffins. Got another cup of coffee. The rest of made, I don't know, 4 or 5 purchases, but he was over his credit limit. Those 4 or 5 purchases cost him $30 each.
Ouch.
Now, the laws, at least in California, changed. It used to be when you open up a checking account, debit card, whatever, that they automatically enrolled you on,
No overdraft or
the
something
overdraft
like
and everything.
that. Yeah.
And they changed it that they have to get you to sign in for it rather than automatically. And, it's, cost people
It's
thousands.
really mixed up. It's hard for people to figure out the financial aspect of things because the banks have one way of doing something, a company has one way of doing something. There's really a lot to learn. So financial literacy should be part of a family's strategy, I believe, at some point, to keep learning about it, keep up to date about it, things like that. Now, tell me about people who you know in business, even yourself. Don't just tell me about yourself. Since you didn't know about some tax strategies, some tax laws, the way some things work with money, how detrimental was that to you as a business owner in the past?
Well, like many people, there were times when the credit card bills were like up to here, And when I talk about stories about even with an 18% interest charge, you can't pay it off. There were times when I was a good enough customer that they kept on giving me credit cards and they kept on increasing credit limits. And that's what happens when you pay your bills. And I remember times when I made $100 payment and, excuse me, $20 went towards the principal and $80 went towards interest.
Ouch.
Okay. And, do the banks have a lot of people defaulting on things? Yeah, but there are tax advantages and, I don't want to say games, but the rules that they play by that they are able to make money in spite of that because of, tax rules. And like I said, that young man that didn't realize that every time here's my debit card, it's, we charging him, I think it was $30.
Yeah, I should have just said decline. Sorry, man, you don't
Yeah.
have the money, and here, save your $120.
Well, yeah, basically, and when I'm talking to him, it's called, I didn't know I was overdrawn. Well, hey, it's your money and your responsibility to know what you have. But on the same token, having a rule where you automatically get overdrawn is maybe not the best thing for individuals and our communities.
Yeah.
And,
Yeah,
there's
because if 10 people who are just, they're not financially astute to things, and they're over there swiping up their credit card for a Starbucks coffee, grabbing a little snacky cake. Yeah, of course they can each drop $100 and $120 late fees. And now here's the bank off of 5 people making $500 just on fees for a few coffees. Yeah, that sucks.
It's unfortunately the problem is that people want somebody else to do it for them.
Yeah, that's true.
Okay.
Well, there's no cavalry coming. There's not going to be a group of people coming to do this for you. This is your own responsibility. You have to be accountable, and this is real life. You got to do things like that, and that's how the Financial Literacy Film Festival was birthed, because it's like, hey, we have to get this information to people. And right now, with digital being prevalent, with Wi-Fi being prevalent, with people able to consume content all over the place, we wanted to use films, and not something like, hey man, you need long-term care, or you need life insurance, or you need this. No, we just wanted to make cool movies that are narrative shorts or whatever it is, and people watch it. It's bite-sized content, and maybe it's thought-provoking. Maybe a few weeks later, they're like, hey, oh yeah, I remember that dude in that movie. He did that thing. And we want them to start at least thinking about that, making that relevant in their own lives, without it being necessarily some financial commercial or retirement commercial or something. We just want to be thought-provoking and have this in the forefront of people's minds.
Well, where did people get this information? Started before I got into the insurance business, like I said, in the mid-90s. And yes, we were out to make a profit. But on the same token, you said, how do people find out about this? By having a sit down at somebody's kitchen table and going over things so they have a choice on what they want to get. For instance, there's term life insurance, which is relatively inexpensive. It doesn't last your whole life. It's got a limited time period. But if you've got a couple of kids who just got born, or in their either in their teens or perhaps, 20s, having a large amount of life insurance is important because kids are expensive. Okay, I know that it's called food in the refrigerator. When I was home, what food? And, going to college, even if you're going to a local community college, costs money. And hopefully when you're going to college, you're learning things that will help increase your potential earnings over the years. Because like you said something, oh, rule of 72. How many, I've talked to people in sales, I've talked to people in a bank that have no clue about that. If anybody's likes to read, it's about yay big. And I got to tell you, there were some chapters that after the third time I was reading through it, it's like, huh? Book called Creature from Jekyll Island. And it talks about a lot of the games, machinations that were used earlier in the century, last century. And people look at it and say, how could they do that? They did it because it was, they learned the rules and the secrets. And one of the only things that changed is instead of having, hundreds of local banks, we have limited local banks, and we have a whole bunch of Chase Manhattans and Citibanks and Wells Fargo and whatever else I'm, not remembering. And you just, they're not all the same, and they'll do things for their benefit and not yours.
Yeah, banks are in the business of profit. That's what a lot of people don't think. They think, oh, there's a bank. That's where I'm supposed to put my money. These guys are here for me. And a lot of banks are trying to turn this around and do better things, but they are in the business of making money.
Well, there's, a legitimate way to make money, and then something that's not so nice. A number of years ago, one of the big banks that I just mentioned, which is a California bank, or at least was then, they were encouraging their people on the floor to open accounts. And they were getting nice bonuses for this, except that instead of opening accounts, they were just opening accounts, not telling the people about it, and transferring monies and costing a lot of money, which was basically illegal. And it took a while before they got into that. And, personally, I would never do business with that bank, but it happened. And it's, I'm old enough that I was around when I come from the New York area, which at one time had, the second, third, fourth, fifth, and sixth banks, largest banks in the country. Bank of America, which is no longer California based. It was taken over by, I don't want to say a little bank, but a smaller bank in North Carolina, which is just mind blowing. But we had Chase Manhattan, which was separate, Manufacturers Hanover, and a bunch of other banks that you had a choice of going to and doing different things. And I have to tell you that one of those things in my life that I wonder about, what happened. I lost my best friend when I was dealing with Chase Manhattan Bank, or whatever they called themselves then. It was great. It was in the shopping center where my store was. I used to walk there. I had a great credit line. They gave me a statement starting the beginning of the month. And suddenly I walk in one day, and none of the platform people, those are the people sitting at the desks, you go to get something done, were there. And they started changing the rules and everything else. And I felt like I lost a good friend, and a lot of the policies they had previously were gone. And
So it was more of a relationship-based thing, and it changed away from that, is what you're saying.
well, I found out that I could drive up the block. It wasn't as convenient, but it was maybe half a mile away, if that much. And I went in there, and was everything the same as I wanted? No. There were some things I didn't like, but they took care of my banking. And instead of service charges of like $40 a month, they were $8 or $10 a month. And, the same thing is with credit cards. People yell and scream, I don't like MasterCard. It's not the credit card, the MasterCard, the Visa, whatever. It's the bank that runs it because they set the rules and the charges and everything. So if you don't like your bank and there are things that you look at your statement and say, nasty word, what's happening? There are a lot of areas, at least in cities where there's a bank on every corner.
Yeah, it's easy. And with the online banking now, especially with COVID-19, more people are just doing online banking. They're using ATMs. And so they're getting more accustomed to not seeing a teller. They're getting more accustomed to even getting a check and taking a picture of it and depositing it with their phone. I mean, that's the level they're at now. So yeah, customer service is a lost art. Definitely is. What type of advice would you have for filmmakers who want to start creating movies, who want to start they say they don't have anything. They say they have an excuse is what they have. How do you encourage a filmmaker who just talks about making a movie, but doesn't have the oomph to do it? How can you try to encourage them?
There are some people that do, and there are some people that talk. And if you want
That's simple.
There's somebody on YouTube that basically wasn't a photographer, and I guess he got married to this new beautiful woman, and he took pictures of her. That was what he did. And I've been accused of having a lot of miscellaneous equipment. This guy has lots of money and very few problems with spending it. He owns hundreds of cameras, and he shows professional style videos that he made back, I guess, in the early 2000s with a inexpensive camcorder. Okay? We're not talking about some, $1,000 plus prosumer, Panasonic or Sony or anything else camcorder, but it was basically a consumer camcorder. And people today, oh, I can't do anything. Some of this, just because it's an older piece of equipment doesn't mean that people haven't created fantastic product, movies, still pictures, hybrid things with the equipment they had. And a lot of it is knowledge. This individual I'm talking to about was in Hollywood for, 20, 30 years. And I think obviously he did well with that. And with him, it's not a question of what he can't do. It's a question of what he can do. And he puts on videos, behind the scenes videos of how things occurred. And it's like he made props. I mean, instead of having actors, it was like, big ships and everything else, made it out of basically foam core and I guess hot melt glue and tape.
We have a red phone as a prop.
Hey, when you
Production
do
design.
filming, one of the things that Hollywood does, because you can't have everything all the time, there's big prop houses. But if you don't have the money to rent all that equipment, you have friends, you have thrift stores.
We have digital technology. We can place things in. There's a lot of solutions for stuff now. Yeah. So you just got to get out there and do it. That's what it comes down to. If you want to do this thing, you got to go out there. A lot of people say, hey, George, I want to be a photographer. And they're holding their cell phone in their hand and they tell me, but I don't have a camera. And I'm looking at their $1,000 cell phone in their hand. And I'm like, man, this person's just not being resourceful enough, or they're not being creative enough.
Well, there's one thing that I get on my Facebook feed. It's, courses on how to use your cell phone. I got to admit, I'm an old guy. I have no clue on doing anything more than making calls and sending some text messages. But there's a lot of things, especially in the newer phones that allow you to be so very creative.
I'm going to use my phone right now.
But you can't just, stand there and take a picture and say, oh, how come it doesn't look like that professional photographer that charges, $800 to take your portrait? Or, how many people do wedding photography? Most of them have no clue on basic photographic techniques. Now that there's YouTube, there's an advantage that we didn't have years ago. I learned a lot of photography when I was in college, and I was in the college newspaper taking pictures and all the film developing and printing and everything. And, there's, when you're shooting for a newspaper, there's some requirements. Space on a newspaper is expensive. You don't want to take a picture that has to be that big. If you can take a picture that's that big. And then I got into wedding photography, and basically I carried the photographer's bag for dozens of weddings, seeing what they did, and maybe learning from what was happening.
That's a huge gem right there. You are seeking mentorship, you are seeking on the job skill training, and people need to value that at the utmost level, because I always ask people, hey, who's your mentor? Who have you learned from? Or what amount of time have you spent learning? And I don't care who it is. It could be just your neighbor, but I want to know that you went on 3 or 4 wedding jobs with your neighbor or somebody who knows what they're doing.
Basically, it was more like 20 or 30. And it was basically one of the big wedding factories where they got this big, enormous building, and they have 8 weddings going on at the same time. And you got to make sure that you know what your bride looks like, because there's so many white dresses around there. You want to make sure you had pictures of the right person,
oh my goodness,
right couple.
But yeah, that type of training is invaluable. More people should try to seek getting to know somebody on that level and learning from them and gaining experience and knowledge. How important do you think leadership and mentorship in our communities are to help the youth just grow up and be just decent people, just overall mentorship and leadership?
Well, that's a big question if we're talking just about film.
Just in general in life.
In general, there's an endless amount of churches here in Fresno, synagogues, other religious organizations. And, like everything else, not every one of these organizations is going to fit into what you need or you want. And sometimes working in a controversial relationship can also teach you things. As far as other things go, there's a ton of different organizations here in Fresno. When I first moved here, it took me a while. I was doing photography for some political events, and I ran into this one guy, and he said, CMAC's downtown, which is the Community Media Access Alliance or something like that. And basically, they taught basic video. And they had all sorts of equipment to loan out. I mean, if you talk about a Hollywood equipment rental place, no, they didn't have the $40,000 cameras or anything else, but they had good semi-professional video cameras. They gave you courses on using them, on editing them. They gave you opportunities. There's a lot of people. CMAC has, I think, 2 or 3 television channels. And they gave you opportunities to do filming for these channels and provided equipment. No, they didn't give you everything in their warehouse to keep until you decide to return it, but it was free. The only charge
sounds like a pretty good deal to me.
The only charge was If you were a student, it was a $25 a year membership. If you were not a student, it was a $50 a year membership.
It's very affordable.
It's called, like I said, renting a video camera. Like I said, it's $1,000 camera, $1,200 camera. Has to cost you more than $50.
Yeah, you have to be willing to invest in yourself. And as far as investments go, that sounds like a pretty good one for somebody to go join a community media collaborative and learn from each other, work with a team, have access to equipment. And just like that guy was like, hey, C-Mac, you got to go down there. Just by you mentioning that here in this video, it's going to be the first time that somebody else hears it, and they're going to go down there. So, it
Hopefully.
continues on.
And the nice thing about it was, I did a lot of camera work there. It was older, big studio cameras on dollies that might have cost more than your car. And just by doing that, I learned a lot about how to take videos, what to do, what not to do. Took me a little while before I, figured out what all the dials and everything else were, and learned some of the terminology, which is important because if you don't speak the language, then you're lost. And there's a lot of miscellaneous language in the film business. And not only that, but I assisted on a whole bunch of different filmmaking, films where people put together, short and longer films and series. And you see some things that you like, and you see some things where you just, oh my God, how could that guy do that? And, obviously they just hadn't been through the experience. And
In the Army, I learned a lot more from the bad sergeants than I did from the good ones.
yeah, well, the Army got you, all the armed forces get you to do stuff like called on-the-job training,
Exactly.
OJT. And anybody who's been in the military should know what that is.
And in the film industry, you should know what that is.
And
Let me ask you, we've got this little show. It's called the Brandi Show. And we have a segment on there. It's called Hard to Explain Music.
okay,
And so we asked the creative community, filmmakers, photographers, just, the people who we're friends with. We say, hey, we're on this mission and we're just trying to get to the bottom of it. When you hear about music, or when you think of music, can you explain it to me? What is music to you in your life? What has it been? What type of role has music played in your life, if any?
honestly, music for me is background noise when I'm driving someplace, or, just sitting at home and doing something, and it's something back there. But basically, music is something that can enhance your mood, or in some cases, depress you if you're hearing stuff you don't like. But,
Has that ever happened to you where you hear a song and it takes you back to a certain time of your life, and maybe it might give you a little mood swing?
well, I listen back to the 60s and 70s and 80s when I was really growing up. And a lot of those songs remind me of things that I did, things that I, wanted to do, may or may not have done. And today, let's say music is different, but it's called, one of the nice things about driving my car is I have these 10 buttons that if I don't like that song, click. If I don't like that song, click. And I have basically 3 or 4 stations that I listen to. And perhaps I should listen to some other stations, because you don't know if you like it until you try it. But, I don't know how many stations, that we have here in Fresno. But even though Fresno is not, New York City or in LA or San Francisco, I don't know, there's got to be 30, 40, 50 different stations on air, with all sorts of different formats.
Was there any ever a particular band or like, Sting or Rolling Stones or Aretha Franklin? I mean, was there somebody that was for a point in your life, you love them or you follow them or something like that?
Mamas and Papas, Janet Joplin. It was, well, this is back in the day, and we had the Fillmore East in New York City, and there are times, more than a few times, that I attended a concert there. I was lucky enough to be able to attend the Janis Joplin concert, and
What year?
I don't remember, sometime in the 70s. I'm not so much interested in, when it was, but I was there and it was an experience, and a whole bunch of other, concerts. And I think they started like, 9 or 10, and sometimes didn't end until 1 or 2 o'clock in the morning. And then there was like driving home for half an hour, 40 minutes. And I had to get up in the morning. Store I had at that time opened up at like 9:30. So it was like, well, I'm glad I went. So,
What kind of things were going on inside of those concerts?
well, there were certain odors from certain people smoking some various herbals, but it was, it wasn't, like a riot or anything else like that. There was people there enjoying themselves. And I think that's one of the things that you mentioned about, what is it about music? It's something that you can, attend and invent and have a positive feeling. And even if it's something that you got to drive, 2 hours or 3 hours away for, and then back, it's, wow, that was something that you could remember, that it was, you had a positive feeling about it. That's one of the things that COVID is destroying, this positive feeling that people get when they're listening to music that they like. By the way, that music they like can be, heavy metal rock, or it could be classical.
Sure.
And we have venues here. And
It's that experience that
It's-
you're enjoying with other humans. You're connecting there, and you guys are connecting on the same frequency, on the same level. And the way Mark Bovey, my buddy, Army veteran, Vetflix CEO, explains it is like the movie theater, the cinema. It's a sanctuary. You go there, and it's a sanctuary of sorts, and everybody in there, they're enjoying this thing and they're experiencing this thing together. So that's kind of
Yeah.
feeling I'm getting from what you're describing here.
well, one of the issues, it's called now that, most movies, full-length features, are available on Netflix or one of the other streaming things. It's different. I watched the original Star Wars on the big screen, and it was like, oh, wow, it's not the same. I mean, if you got a smaller room and you got a TV this big, it's pretty good. But, people who are watching movies on a cell phone, it's like, huh? You just can't get
You missed
that
the point.
experience. And certainly you don't have the surround sound and everything else. But it's that things change over our lifetime, and we have to learn how to adapt it or change the channel.
Yeah,
And
that's right. It seems like music has had a lot of influence in your life, and you've had good experiences attached to it. So I'm glad I asked you about it. And this show, like I told you, it's called The Brandi Show. Brandi McCougai is the producer, and she's a young lady on a mission out here to find out why people love music. So thank you very much, Mr. Jonathan Ira. Appreciate you.
great to be here.